Hi everyone, for today's session, we're going to present Zoroastrian community of Metropolitan Washington, D.C., ZAMWI, who has actively participated in programs of Interfaith Council of Washington, D.C. for several decades, having attained membership at the time of its first executive director, the Reverend Clark Ropstein. For today's session, we're going to present Zoroastrianism and individual responsibility. Zoroastrianism is a faith that originated in ancient Persia under the teachings of Prophet Zarathustra, a religion that flourished under three Persian empires, which at one time extended from Africa to China, from the Danube River in Europe to plains of Judea in Middle East, up to Sindh and Punjab in India. Today, its followers numbers are less than 200,000 worldwide. One of the largest groups of Zoroastrians can be found in India and Iran. There are sizable groups in USA, Canada, UK, Pakistan, and smaller communities all around the globe. The core ideas of the faith are presented in the Gathas, the 17 songs composed by Prophet Zarathustra approximately 3,700 years ago. The Gathas consist of 6,000 words crafted in a poetic form to convey Zarathustra's message. This was long before writing and recording were established. The Gathas, which we call our scriptures, presents a collage of faith-inspired interactions on crucial events such as human rights, justice, equality, through the exercise of individual responsibility. Our panelists thought individual responsibility is a good topic to discuss as it's focused on the current situation we find ourselves globally. We're presented with choices on a daily basis in order to act in our own and our community's best interest. This session is facilitated by two panelists and two moderators. For our panel discussion, we have a priest and a priestess. They can be recognized wearing a long white formal garment, which is worn while performing their priestly rituals. Our speakers are from all around the globe, in Toronto, Canada, Karachi, Pakistan, and Washington, D.C., USA. First, I would like to introduce Hormuz. Hormuz Katki is a Mabed Yar at ZAMWI and teaches in their children's class. He has participated in many IFC events over the past 20 years, such as an Act to End Racism event at the National Mall memorizing the 50th anniversary of the death of Martin Luther King. He is also a cancer researcher at National Cancer Institute. Thanks for joining us today, Hormaz. Next, we would like to give the spotlight to Mashad. Mashad Khosrawani has endowed with the honor of becoming the first Zoroastrian female priestess in North America and youngest in Iran at age 20. In addition to her religion commitments, she procured an honors degree in HRM from York University and her IMBA from Schulich School of Business. She lives in Toronto, Canada. And I would like to give the next spotlight to Shireen Mary, my co-moderator. Shireen has presented Zoroastrianism as a part of a team at the United Nations Commission on Status of Women. She's active in the development space and is working with the grassroots movement Green Box to help youth achieve leadership in her community. Her main objective is to work towards gender equality, economic empowerment, and educating youth. And as for myself, I have presented Zoroastrians at the United Nations Civil Society Conference in Salt Lake City, Utah, and the Commission on Status of Women in New York. I've participated in various IFC events, the 9/11 Unity Walk, the Interfaith Concert, the National Grassroots Program, which is the outgrowth of the Know Your Neighbor Coalition, and a conference bicycle pedaled on the Embassy Road. And I'm excited to see what our speakers are bringing to this IFC event today. So starting our first session, I want to ask Mabed Yar Mashad, what is Zoroastrianism's main message?
Zoroastrianism is one of the world's oldest documented religions and was founded by the prophet Zarathustra in Central Asia. Zarathustra received several revelations from Ahura Mazda, the wise god, which outlined the purpose of Ahura Mazda in his work, The Wise God, and also his purpose of truth, order, and asha, which revealed the existence of the destructive or deceitful mind known as the Angra Mainyu, that thought to spread durut or lies. As we see in the next slide, the revelations were laid out through songs and poems containing the core teachings of Zarathustra known as the Gathas. The Gathas and the doctrine of Zarathustra are as relevant today as they were when composed by a prophet millennia ago. In fact, they are timeless and ever abiding. It is a doctrine based on the trifecta ethos of Hommata, Hochta, Hovarashta, denoting good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. The Gathas revealed Zarathustra's main message, which is one of the upholding the righteous path of Asha. The way of Asha, of goodness, order, truth, and justice can be practiced by anyone in any society. In principle, any human being living and practicing a righteous life of truth, kindness, and goodness may be deemed as a Zoroastrian. For every good thought, good word, and good deed we do, we are helping Ahura Mazda and each other grow and prosper as a society and civilization. And we have the choice to do so, as it is not imposed. It also highlights the importance Zoroastrianism places on free will, providing and empowering each individual with the ability and freedom of self-determining their own destiny by the choices they make for themselves and by themselves.
Thank you, Masha, for this wonderful and beautiful introduction. I do see how Gathas have an emphasis on individual responsibility. And you would agree, as growing up Zoroastrians, we're often taught about Vahumana, the good mind. And we're told to use our good mind to exercise this responsibility. My next question would be to our Mabed, Hormas. Could you elaborate on the Gathas and show us what is written in the Gathas?
I would like to talk about the role of individual responsibility in Zoroastrianism, where the role was primarily about helping each other to live in a just and civil society. A key message of Zoroastrianism is that we're individually responsible to each other. Zarathustra lived in a time of warring and marauding nomads. People didn't really live in villages. And one of his key messages at that time, this was of course 4,000 or more years ago, and one of the key messages of his was for humans to settle into living in villages, to live in a civil society with rules and structure that accords with natural law. And instead of being nomads, to become farmers, to take care of the land and their animals. And so Zoroastrianism emphasizes this individual responsibility to make good choices so that we can all live together in a civil and a just society. We have to find and play our role. And that appears again and again in our teachings. There is a role for solitary spiritual enlightenment, but it's less about solitary spiritual enlightenment than about how we all live together in society. And this comes out in Zarathustra's own songs, which is what we have of his teachings. They're called the Gathas. And in one of his earliest songs, one of his earliest Gathas, he says openly about how humans are free to choose between good and evil. And it goes like this. Srautau geushaish vahishta avenata sucha manangao avarenao vichattayao narem kakiao tanuye Parao maze yaungo amai ne sazdiai baudanto paiti. Hear the best truth with your ears and decide with your pure mind. Let everyone judge for themselves and find out what they ought to do. Before the final judgment, everyone should make their decision. To emphasize about how much choice that our Lord Ahura Mazda gives us is the concept of the fravashi. A human being isn't just our body. There's also spiritual parts of us. And our fravashi is the spiritual part of humans that is immortal and incorruptible. That's in contrast to the soul, which we call Urvan, which can be corrupted by your actions. When our Lord Ahura Mazda created the universe, he created it, but he cannot get rid of evil in it without help from humans. And this is where the Fravashis were important. Your Fravashi chose to take human form, to be born on earth to fight evil. And that's an important point. And Ahura Mazda gave his creations the freedom to choose between good and evil. And you may not think that you chose to be born, but your Fravashi indeed chose to take human form for you to be born on earth. But human beings are also prone to making bad and evil decisions, so we need guidance. And we are internally guided by spiritual beings. And the most important one that I'm going to talk about is a being called Vohumana, or the good mind that discerns between good and evil, but discerns in that way, guided by a spirit of empathy for mankind. Similarly, we're externally guided by good and just leadership. Now I'm going to talk about the path of Asha that the best leaders help us all follow on. Asha, the eternal law of life. And there are two key things that we need in this. Not only, as I said, a way to discern between good and evil, but also that spirit of empathy for mankind. So Vohumana is a spiritual being who represents the good mind, who helps us choose between good and evil. But what's interesting is that the word Vohu comes from the ancient Avestan Sanskrit root va, which means love. It is a mentality that is guided by a spirit of love and generosity toward the earthly creations of Ahura Mazda. That means that you can't choose between good and evil without being guided by the spirit of love and generosity toward fellow man. And this is very important. You can't just mathematically choose between good and evil. And the Mahatma Gandhi himself said this in one of his famous quotes. I call him religious who understands the suffering of others. And Gandhi at his ashram, he had a favorite quote from the Gathas that I have on the next slide that illustrates this point about the central role of empathy. It goes like this. Mazdat moi vahistao sravaus chao shyot nayachao vau chao tatu vohu manangao ashao chao ishudem stuto shmakao shatrao ora ferashem vasnao haitiem dawahum. Teach me, O Lord, the words and deeds that are noblest and best. Through love of fellow man, through search of truth, make my life express the yearnings and the prayers of my heart. Through the strength to serve you, O Lord, renew my life and make it as true as you wish. And empathy also appears in the most important prayer in our religion, called the Yatahu Varya prayer, which is composed of 3 lines. I'm going to go a little backwards here. I'm going to show you the last 2 lines of it before I get to the first one. But the last 2 emphasize this point about empathy. Vangayush does dao manango, shaltananam angayush must die. Which means the blessing of Vohumana is for those working for Ahura Mazda here on earth. Shatrem chao ahurai ayim dregubyo darat vastarem. The creative energy of Ahura Mazda descends on those who protect and nourish the poor. And now I want to come back to that first line of the Yatahu Varya, because this pertains to how we select leaders on earth to help guide us. And these leaders follow what we call the law of Asha. The first line goes like this. Yatahu Varyo ataratush ashat chit hachao. Just as our political and military leaders have power on earth, so does the spiritual leader due to his Asha. You can think of Asha as the accumulated spiritual knowledge of righteousness that comes from the accumulated merit of the good deeds that ensue from spiritual enlightenment. We venerate those who have knowledge of righteousness and this spiritual enlightenment and an actual track record of putting that into action for the benefit of Ahura Mazda's creations. To emphasize the importance of choosing good leaders, I want to also give you another short prayer, which is the 3rd most important prayer in our religion, called the Yenge Hatam prayer. And it goes like this. Yenge Hatam at yasne paiti vango muzdao huro veta ashata chao yongam chao tascha yazamede. We venerate those men and women whose every act is alive with accumulated spiritual enlightenment. Ahura Mazda recognizes them as the best and noblest. They are the true leaders of mankind. So how do we choose our political leaders? And Gehata makes that clear. It's those men and women whose every act is alive with Asha, the eternal law of life. We don't choose the person who's the most powerful or the richest. We choose those who really follow the path of Asha that comes from accumulated spiritual enlightenment. And so I'll just end with a traditional ending, which was the Hamazor Hamashobed. It's a special handshake where you interleave your hands together and you say Hamazor Hamashobed. May we go forth united in strength and righteousness.
Thank you so much for diving into the scriptures deeply there, Homas, and telling us more about individual responsibility and leadership in Zoroastrianism. I would now like to turn the conversation towards Mashhad, being the first recognized female priestess in Northern America. I wanted to understand from you your experiences when it comes to inspiration from the scripture and how you find the role of men and women in the community.
The unfortunate reality is that we are living in a world that has grown too comfortable with discrimination. People discriminate based upon race, gender, socioeconomic background, age, sexual preference, and honestly, the list can go on and on. People can find so many reasons for not wanting to treat others with respect, dignity, and acceptance. Some found the right to discriminate against women and considered them physically inferior, and therefore they concluded that women must be lesser being. Before 1918, women weren't even considered people and were denied the right to vote, and until 2018 were not permitted to drive in Saudi Arabia. The prejudicial gulf between men and women is an overpowered reality that is unfortunately still justifiable by our society today. Certain class of men, accustomed to generations in power, see both their influence and their institutions challenged by women, which can become a bruising and at times challenging battle. And on that account, a change was what I craved, but I knew that I had to start small in order to flourish into an anchored revision in our community. So I set forth to be the change that I wanted to see. However, I have realized that validation from others is a costly deed despite one's sexual category, for we are already valuable in our own unique way. Acceptance, respect, and credence are the ingredients to a serene and respectful fellowship allying both genders. It is no secret that the Zoroastrian community erupted when I initially embarked on the quest to ply my aspiration of becoming a religious revolver at the age of 17 and to attain myself more than anything, a strong, mentally and spiritually, and most importantly, happy being. However, it is noteworthy that in the ancient Persian societies, women had far more significant roles than probably in any other pre-modern societies. In antiquity, there were many female priests, politicians, warriors. We had female naval commanders in the Persian Empire, women who were owners of the largest states up to the Sasanian time. And at one point, the Greeks even made fun of the Persians for being under the thumb of their women. The whole concept is rather more modern and not something that is often associated with an ancient empires, but it is imperative to note that the respect for women has to do with Zarathustra's emphasis on the individual. As you see in the slide, in the Gathas, Zarathustra refers to man or woman, or man and woman repeatedly, for the position of man and woman is equal in all aspects. Also, in rites, rituals, and costumes, men and women are considered equal. And in particular, when he's officiating his youngest daughter's wedding, he honors her choice of her own husband and refers to her and addresses her with utmost respect. We read in Vaishtushkat Hot 53, verse 3, O Purchista of Spantama's house and Hichotaspa's family, O the youngest offspring of Zarathustra, Mazda Ahura has bestowed upon you as husband and lord, the person who has deep attachment to Vahuman and truth. Therefore, consult with your inner self and wisdom and act through Almighty. Zarathustra considered the respect of one woman as one of his duties, and he considered any kind of indignity or inequality as something against the order of wisdom. There is a tremendous emphasis on personal conscience in Zoroastrianism. And the gulf of time has in no way diminished the profound view and importance of gender equality in the eyes of Zarathustra. The view and the value he places on the tenet is just as, if not more important in today's modern society. I am a huge advocate of human equality, and not just women's or men's, but humans in total, equality despite one's race, gender, or sexual preference. As a female priestess, I have continuously strived to inspire and be inspired, to strengthen the future of our religion in the long run, as Zoroastrianism is currently on a steep decline of falling into the records of religious history. Zoroastrianism, as we know it, is one of the smallest religions in the world, yet despite its obscurity, its influence continues to be felt.
Thank you, Mashad. Just to add, you've definitely inspired all females around in the Zoroastrian community. And I enjoyed listening to your speech specifically because in today's world, all we talk about is gender equality, how to achieve better, do better. And I enjoyed hearing about the Gathas because you see, 3,000 years ago, all these were written in the scriptures. Everything was mentioned about gender equality, the wage gap, discrimination, how equal is the best platform. And I think all of us should go back to our history, read those, understand those, and come back with more compassion for everyone. And as we're towards the end of the session, my next question is to our co-moderator, Shireen. And I want to ask Shireen, what type of roles do you see individuals take in our community in the modern day and in the future?
Thank you for that, Benush. So, as shared by our previous panelists, there is so much in the scriptures when it comes to individual responsibility and choices that we make. So this is something that not only do I gain inspiration on an individual level, but also on a community level, we are able to see globally that people take up roles, whether professionally or on a volunteer basis, in areas such as education, welfare, rehabilitation, or environment. To really, truly, with all the work that we do, it should contribute to one's life and resources, create positive changes. The religion inspires everyone to create not just economic, but also social value, and to do it in a way that we remember or we keep in mind the future generations that are to come. At the same time, I would definitely want to point out that we as a community have come from perhaps one small part of the world, but at the moment exist all over in smaller communities. And this kind of positive change is something you will continue to see from the decades to come.
Thank you, Shireen. That was beautifully said. And as we're approaching to our end of the session, I would like all our panelists who presented today to open their cameras so we can do our last Hama. Are we all ready for the Hama Zor Hama show? Okay, so Hama Zor Hama a show. May we all go forth united in strength and righteousness. Thank you.